Welcome back to Understanding Ink, the show where you learn exactly what the print journey looks like and how you can make your books even better. I'm your host, Max Flowers, a comic book creator and illustrator doing everything I can to learn more about the comic craft and teaching you all that I learn. Today, we're going to be looking at templates, when to start using them, how they work, and how they can help you fly through the pre-press process to get your books even faster. Now, before we even send our books to the printer, we need to prepare during the creation of our book for proper sizing, spacing, and placement. The best tool to do all of this is templates, so let's have a look at some. So what we have here in front of us is the standard CWS comic book size template. Now there's a lot of different sizes of templates. There's a lot of things to consider and a lot of technical terms that we need to be aware of before we even start placing content onto our page. Really, before we even draw a single line for the first page, we should be uploading and importing a template to get started. Now, there's a few things about the file itself that we want to make sure. We want to make sure that it is correctly sized, that it is 6.88 by 10.25, which is the size of a document with bleed, which we'll get into in a second. We're also going to make sure that our resolution is set to 300 dpi, which is going to make sure that everything is crisp and that it's not 72 dpi, which is mainly for online images. We also want to make sure that our color profile is set to CMYK, which is what printers use, versus RGB, which is what digital screens use. Now, there's a lot of different ways to check those dimensions and check that those properties are accurate, but it really depends on the program you're using. So just make sure that those settings are set up before you even do anything. Now, if we zoom in here, we're going to notice a few things. First, we're going to have these pretty technical terms like bleed area, trim line, and safe area. Now, the bleed area is what we're going to talk about first. The bleed area is the size of your document, and it is this red area right here. Now, any artwork that you have that's going to be stretching off the edge of the page, any sound effects, really anything that you want to go right up to the edge of your page, you need to make sure that it goes into this red marked area. Now, what this will do is prevent any kind of white line showing up or anything like that in case the trimmer is not completely 100% accurate. Even if it's off by a millimeter or two, you're going to have those white edges show up if you don't have your artwork going all the way to the edge of this red area here. Now, our trim line is also going to be the size of our finished book. So after everything is printed and trimmed, that will be the size of our page. So we also want to make sure that we're not putting any important information into the bleed area. And we want to note that this right here is actually where our page is going to be physically cut once it's printed. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about is the safe area. Now, the safe area is a little bit it's not suggested, it's required, but it's a little bit flexible in terms of where it's going to go, which we're going to talk about in a second with the gutter area. But really what it's for is to make sure that any important information, especially text or anything in a speech balloon or important things like your character's face or their hands, are not going to be cut off. So anything that's vitally important to our page, we're going to make sure stays inside of that safe area right there. So really all that vital information needs to be within the boundaries of that blue line. And then the gutter area is basically an expanded safe area where on perfect bound books with so many pages, there's going to be more material that's stuck into the gutter or the middle of the book or on the edge of the page. When the book gets assembled, it's going to have a curve to it, and then the trimmer cuts that off. So anything that's in the middle is actually going to have more of that page cut off. So we really need to make sure that any kind of important text is an additional space within our page. And this same thing again applies for hands and faces and really anything vital that we want to have on our page. Now, this is only one size of comic book template, and there's multiple different print sizes that you might be looking for. We're going to have all of those files available to you as well, whether it's a manga size or a golden age size, or even if you're doing a mini book or an art book. We're going to have templates available for you to choose from to make sure that your book is going to come out accurately. Now, what if you want to do a double page spread and you want to do all the art on one page? Then you're going to want to use a double page spread template, which is really just two of those almost combined together, but not quite. So the important thing to note on this one is that all of those key items are still going to be there. That bleed area, that trim line, that safe area, especially around the edges of your document, all of those are going to be exactly the same. What you really need to pay attention to is anything that's in the middle here, because that is where the page is going to be put into the gutter, and we don't want any important information to be lost there. So if we zoom in to the center, we can see we still have those three key areas. We're going to have this black trim line here is no longer the trim line. It's going to be the center gutter of the book. Now, this red bleed area is also not necessarily going to be bleed. It's more going to be like our safe area. As you can see, the blue dotted line is right there. So we want to make sure that no important information crosses into this space here. And on a perfect bound book, we want to be even safer and make sure that there's no important information there. Now, that's not to say that you can't have something crossing the gutter line, or, if you're doing a full bleed double page spread, you can't put anything there. You just have to be mindful of what you put there, which we're going to talk about in a second when we look at some examples of some art over these templates. Now, let's say you want to do your work traditionally with pen and paper in real life and not do anything digitally. You're going to want a traditional board. And a lot of times these are touchy. Sometimes you can buy these online from different suppliers or buy them at your local art store. Sometimes, like myself, you can make a custom one and print it at home if you have a large format printer. Now, this kind of template is going to have the same elements as those CWS digital templates. The difference is that it's all monotone, but you still have the same elements here. For example, this right here is your bleed. This right here is your trim. And these lines, as well as the corner of this 16 panel grid, is going to be my safe area. So it operates under those same principles. Now, I've made my board custom to me. It has my logo. It has some information at the top that I want on my pages. But I also did a lot of math to make sure that proportionally I could maximize the use of an 11 by 17 board while still keeping the same proportions of the CWS standard comic size. Now, boards are going to vary in sizes, just as comic books vary in sizes. So manga artists might be using an A4 size traditional template. Some painters or super realistic artists are going to be using a 20 by 30 size board, and they're going to have to probably measure out those proportions and their areas, their bleed, trim, and safety line onto their board. Now, as we grow in size, we typically want to make our bleed area and our safe area larger, because as they get shrunken down, those spaces are also going to shrink. Some artists also do 10 by 15, which is actually an industry norm, but it's the proportions of it are not completely correct as to what a comic book page comes out to in size. So in that sense, you just have to be mindful of those proportions, which only comes with years of experience. What I really suggest is you do your research, do your math, and really look into it if you are going to do your pages traditionally. Now that we've talked about the anatomy of a template, let's look at what art would look like on here and how we can make sure and double check that everything is correct. So this page right here is a page taken from Teenage Babylon by Brandon Blocksdorf and Christian Lee Villanueva. And it's a great looking page. So let's make sure that when this gets printed, it's going to be printed exactly how we want it to, and nothing's going to be cut off. So we're going to go to our page here, and we're going to turn the opacity down. And so I know for a fact that Christian does these pages traditionally. So they probably did it on a traditional board like this and then scanned it. And now we're going to double check that digitally everything is lining up where it needs to go. So if we zoom in, we can see that this is a full bleed spread. So let's add another layer here. So all of their art is going to be going off to the edge of the pages there. Right? And that's going to make sure that we don't have any white lines. Again, like we talked about earlier, when the book is trimmed. We're also going to note that all of the text here is well within the safe area to make sure that all of our text shows up on our page. All of our panels, this small panel right here, doesn't cross that blue safety line. Every single panel is within that blue safety line. Even things like hands and faces are within that blue safety line. Now, if we go to the bottom here, there's some rules being broken, right? So this is a big sound effect with text that we talked about. We don't want that to cross our blue safety line, but because it's a sound effect that bleeds off the edge of the page, we want to actually make sure that it goes off the bleed area. And we know that it's going to be cut, but our reader is still going to be able to read what this page or what this sound effect says. Same thing with this panel. This panel is bleeding off to the edge of the page, but we know that beforehand and we are designing it. Even the hand right here is within that blue safety line area. So this page would be all ready to go and export and put into our final file. Now, if we're looking at a double page spread, let's look at those same things. So great page done by Chris Anderson that was in the CWS Heroes Con anthology. Now let's look at a few things to make sure that Chris's page is going to print properly. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to turn down our opacity. And now we're going to look at a few stuff. So Chris has kind of a panel here, but he also has tinted his page to be an off-white color. And now that off-white color does run off into our bleed area, which is going to make sure that his off-white is the color of the page and there is no jarring bright white of the paper showing through. Now his panel aligns with the safe area because he wants to make sure that his panel is clearly separated from his off-white background and that nothing is going to be trimmed weird or unevenly when his book gets printed. Now at the bottom, all of this text here and here falls within that blue trim line like we talked about. and we're just talking about the edges right now. So all of Chris's stuff works for the edges just like it did for the single page. Now, remember what's different about a double page spread is that we have to really worry about what is in the center here. And Chris does a great job of making sure that there's no important information in the center of his page. So he does have these creatures or monsters going across that double page spread, but there's nothing vital in that area, such as, you know, the eyeball here or the eyeball here. That's well away from that center area. Same thing with his text balloons. His text balloon over here is far enough inside to the left of the page that it's not going to come close to the gutter. Even here, he's cleverly separating his speech balloons and not moving these over so that would occupy a space like this, so that all of his text falls within even the gutter area, and is making sure that all of his text is going to be readable no matter how this book is printed. And that's pretty much it. You really want to use these templates from the get-go. Make sure that your art is not going to be printed improperly or sized improperly or having elements that are going to be cut off or warped when your book is finally printed. So these pages are awesome. They're ready to go. We checked them against our template. So now we can look into exporting our pages and assembling a print-ready PDF to send to our printer and get our books printed. We're going to be talking about that next week on Understanding Ink. We're going to be talking about how to create your own pre-press print-ready file to send direct to your printer. So stay tuned for that. Catch us next week on Sunday, and have a good one. Stay creative, stay inspired. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.